Hello and welcome back to 15-Minute English Lessons, the channel where we try and teach you something useful about English in 15 minutes. So, today we are talking about the Prince of Cats Tybalt Capulet from William Shakespeare's classic tale, Romeo and Juliet, and what he means and why he's so important as a dramatic construct. Okay, so you've probably seen Baz Luhrmann's 1996 adaptation of Romeo and Juliet, and if you haven't, I highly recommend it. The scene where Romeo murders Tybalt on the steps of the fountain is one of the most emotionally striking, I would say, in the film. The sky is rent asunder, the brain begins to pour. There's no mistaking the symbolism. The tragic climax of the play begins now. And the moment seems kind of instant, but in fact Shakespeare's been subtly building up to it ever since the opening scene of the play, establishing Tybalt as both an irresistible force and an immovable object. He might be a minor character in the eyes of some. In fact, he only has 34 lines in the entire play, but I think Tybalt is critical to this play's success and its place among the pantheon of great tragedies. Okay, he's a masterclass in dramatic construction by Shakespeare. Structurally, he's played to perfection, not least in his first appearance. The opening scene of the play is renowned for kind of light-hearted banter and sexual innuendo. Samson and Gregory indulge in some fairly harmless wordplay, phallic symbol giggling, and even a bit of sword fighting with their quote-unquote enemy. But for me, the scene's notable in that it lacks any serious threat or menace, with hedging from both sides, double-checking and questioning whether the law is on their side, and the childish, although visually amusing, thumb-biting, suggesting neither side's really that serious about this feud. Not for long. When Tybalt enters the scene, it takes him fewer than 8 lines to say the words death, hate and hell, and crucially, he's the first character in the play to say any of these words. His first imperative sentence orders the peaceful Benvolio to turn and face his death, and such arrogance in the face of Benvolio, a character who represents peace, maturity, restraint, immediately sets Tybalt apart as the antithesis to all of those things. From this point on, the audience understands that any time they see Tybalt arrive, there's going to be tension, if not a complete brawl. And this, of course, comes to fruition in Act 3, Scene 1, which is the critical tipping point from comedy to tragedy. And that scene, I think, is a video all in itself. And when Tybalt arrives, once Mercutio, who is already established as an unpredictable, quick-witted, boisterous, teasing character, has been shown to be in a particularly provocative mood, the audience are going to be shaking in their seats with anticipation. Romeo's arrival shortly after provides the perfect storm for Shakespeare to unleash some of his most emotionally fraught writing. So, let's have a look at Shakespeare's thought process, and before you ask, yes, I do know what he was talking about. Structurally, students, that's you, need to think about Shakespeare's requirements when he creates a character. Now, Tybalt serves all kinds of dramatic purposes in the play, and in order for those to be accepted by the audience, Shakespeare's got to ensure that he pitches the character just right. Shakespeare needs Tybalt to die, and what's more, he needs Romeo to kill him. Therefore, the audience can't admire Tybalt too much, because if they do, when he does die, there'll be too much sympathy. The kind of sympathy, in fact, that we get from Mercutio, despite his part as in the architect of his own downfall. The kind of sympathy that makes the audience hope that the murderer will meet with very swift vengeance. And when Tybalt kills Mercutio, the audience need to join with Romeo in baying for Tybalt's blood. And when Romeo spills it, the audience can't then feel that an injustice has been done. So, from the very earliest point in the play, Tybalt has to be created in the image of a true villain, and he is. He's proud, pompous, arrogant, violent, mocking. He really doesn't have any layers that leave us in any doubt as to his true character. Fundamentally, he's not that nice. Now, the term toxic masculinity didn't exist in Shakespeare's time, but clearly it was a relevant concern. And Tybalt is basically the perfect toxic male. He's obsessed with the feud, which is completely meaningless and ancient, even says in the prologue that it's ancient, because it gives him some sort of identity. And that can be troubling when it's taken too far. By all means, have a rivalry. That's totally fine. That can be a lot of fun. Healthy competition, healthy rivalry, even pretty serious competition can be a lot of fun, very healthy. But some people stab each other because they are wearing different coloured clothes. And for that, you just really need to grow up a little bit. Okay, let's talk about the hallmarks of a tragic, toxic man. Because I think that's what Tybalt is. Desperate to prove their strength and how big and strong they are all the time. We've all seen that. Incapable of processing their emotions in a sensible and mature way. Thinks the people who fear him actually respect him, which is hilarious and also tragic. And is more bothered about status and prestige than being a good person. I just wish there was like a modern day equivalent that I could equate to, because Tybalt also runs a sex trafficking business in Romania. Oh no, wait, he doesn't do that, does he? That's somebody else. Look, this isn't personal to Andrew Tate. I mean, of course it is, because he's a moron, but he, like Tybalt, merely symbolises the character of the repressed, scared little boy. When confronted by Romeo offering to shake his hand because he says he loves him, Tybalt literally cannot handle it. And I do have a modicum of sympathy for men like this. They must have been brought up so badly and must have learned to push their emotions down so far at a very young age. But at the same time, taking your own emotional stupidity out on other people is for idiots. So, basically I'm saying Tybalt probably would have had a podcast and maybe punched people. Anyway. Right, let's talk about the language of the play. Benvolio's role is largely choric in this play. He sums up the first fight for the prince, for example, and talks about the way the fiery Tybalt with his sword prepared arrived upon the scene. Now, notice the use of language there. Tybalt's sword is prepared as he enters the scene, giving an immediate visual clue, this is a play after all, to the audience that this is part of him. This is in his DNA. At some point in this play, he's going to use this sword. Shakespeare then builds on this early fiery image of him, and there is so much to say about what fiery tells us, it could probably fill another video, by ensuring that every time he enters a scene, his language is filled with venom. Look at his first line upon seeing Romeo at the Capulet ball. This by his voice should be a Montague, "Fetch me my rapier, boy, what dares the slave come hither?" His first action is to ask for a sword and immediately refer to the son of a nobleman as a slave. Later on, in the same scene, when Lord Capulet asks him why he's storming around, another word rich with meaning, his reply kind of simmers with this disgust when he says, "Uncle, this is a Montague, our foe, a villain hither come in spite to scorn at our solemnity this night." And look how much negativity is conveyed in just 3 lines. The words foe, villain, spite and scorn all ripple with fury at the sight of Romeo, not to mention the fact that Tybalt dismisses him with this. In no time at all, Shakespeare establishes that Tybalt is not for calm discussion, and that proves crucial later when Benvolio pleads with him to reason coldly of his grievances. The audience knows this is never going to happen. Cold is not the temperature Tybalt runs at. He's been angling for a fight since the first time he walked on stage. At no point in the play so far has he appeared without openly desiring conflict, and by the time Mercutio asks for one of his 9 lives, he is at boiling point. I think that Shakespeare takes on a didactic voice through Tybalt. His lesson to the audience is basically that violence begets violence and no good will come of refusing to sacrifice your pride and move on. Tybalt is kind of the epitome of the angry young man, and by the time Romeo and Juliet are married at the end of Act 2, Tybalt's crucially the only character left in the play who's still eager for this ancient grudge to continue. Even Lord Capulet has said that he and Lord Montague are old men and it shouldn't be too hard to keep the peace. He doesn't seem... He's hot-headed. We see that later on in the play. We see it with Tybalt, we see it with Juliet, but he doesn't really care about the feud. Before Tybalt gets on stage in Act 3, Scene 1, the entire play is moving towards a happy ending. The protagonists are married, it's mostly been jokes, and even, like I say, even the fathers are sort of swallowing their pride and conceding that the fight's gone on long enough. It's Tybalt who refers to honour when he sees Romeo in his family's house. It's Tybalt who insists that Romeo shall not be endured, despite the master of the house insisting that he shall. It's Tybalt's insatiably arrogant desire to strike Romeo dead that leads him to seek Romeo out in the streets, and that brings about his eventual death. In harnessing the arrogant pride of this teenager, Shakespeare creates the perfect catalyst for his most enduring tragedy. Without Tybalt's youthful narcissism, there's no dramatic climax to the play, and without that, the tragedy can't unfold. Now, Act 3, Scene 1 is a scene of simmering tension and explosive violence, but interestingly, Franco Zeffirelli's film from 1968 makes the choice to play the fight between Mercutio and Tybalt, at least at the start, as kind of good-natured, harmless horseplay. Now, I've disliked this decision for years, but it does at least offer a chance to see Tybalt's arrogance. Providing he's in control of the fight, he's happy to laugh about it all, but as soon as he becomes the butt of the joke, Michael York subtly but beautifully plays the change in his mood as he stops finding it quite so funny. And when he finally inflicts the fatal blow on Mercutio, he's shocked as anyone, but when Romeo finds him, he refuses to apologise. Tybalt's final line in the play, "Thou wretched boy that didst consort with him here, shall with him hence," reveals the full extent of his self-belief. He doesn't for a moment consider explanation or apology, and as Shakespeare has already established, he fights first and he asks questions later. However, this time, the audience are placed in something of a state of dramatic tension. We know that Tybalt's a brilliant swordsman, and we know he's a furious and vicious fighter. We also know that Romeo is a very emotional character who's rightly angered by the death of his best friend, so we know this fight can't end well. Romeo even predicts that when he screams, "Either thou or I or both must go with Mercutio," but The scene is rife with problems. If Tybalt kills Romeo, then surely the play is over, so that can't happen. But if Romeo kills Tybalt, he will murder his new wife's cousin. And the only way for this scene to end positively is if one or both of the men can be convinced to leave their grievances. Through his mastery of character development and structure, Shakespeare ensures there is no way this scene can have such an ending. After that, the whole play becomes a downward spiral, because it has to, because in the end, these two star-crossed lovers are going to die, and despite the sheer incredulity you might feel about the plot that Friar Lawrence comes up with, desperate times call for desperate measures, and let's be honest, neither Romeo nor Juliet's maturity is really one of their strengths, is it? In fact, the incredulity at the plan that Juliet comes up with is captured really nicely, I think, by Caitlin Dever in the film Rosaline.
But I already have a plan.
You do? Okay, that's great. What is it?
I'm going to fake my own death.
Sorry, what?
It's simple. There's this potion that causes total body paralysis for hours at a time. I'll drink it, they'll find me, it'll look like I'm dead, then they'll prepare me for burial. Then, once they leave, I'll wake up. Romeo will then come out of hiding. He's at the Montacute Chapel with Benvolio right now. Then he'll find me in the church, carry me off into the sunset, and we'll live happily ever after. It's foolproof.
Okay. Juliet, that is quite possibly the dumbest fucking thing I've ever heard in my life. Are you kidding me? There's like 50 different ways that could go wrong. I mean, what if the potion has side effects? What if they actually bury you? Have you thought of that? What if Romeo thinks you're really dead?
I've sent Steve the courier to tell him.
Steve the courier is an idiot! You've got to trust me. My plan is better. Let's go. Juliet, what... Did you drink it already?
But that's all for another day and for another video. So subscribe if you like this, leave a comment, tell me what aspect of the play you'd like me to focus on next, or what part of English you want to like a bit more. And for now, I will wish you a fond farewell and a lovely rest of your day. Apologies for the noise in the background. Okay, everybody, see you in the next video. Take care. Bye-bye.